Hello again, and God be with you. Well, I have another story from Bob Hartman's New Testament Tales. This one is about one of the more well known of Jesus' miracles. And it's called the Fussy Eaters version. Samuel looked in his basket and sighed. Bread. Lots of bread, but no butter and no jam. And fish. 2 fish. Flat and salted and hard. Samuel was no fan of fish. Bread, well, bread was not much better, but it was all his mum had packed. So when lunchtime came, Samuel decided he would swap. First, he went to his cousin Anna. "I've got something amazing for my lunch," he boasted, with the basket behind his back. "Want to swap?" Anna rolled her eyes. "It's bread and fish, isn't it?" she said. "Might be," Samuel answered. "It's what your mum always gives you," she replied. "You can't fool me. And no, I don't want to swap, because I didn't even bring lunch. My dad thought we'd be home by now." "Oh," Samuel shrugged. "All right then, I'll ask someone else." "Someone who doesn't know my mum," he promised himself. "Someone who doesn't know what's in my basket." So off he went across the hillside, looking for a likely swapper. He spotted his friend Micah, but Micah's mum was the worst cook in their village. He'd gone to Micah's house for dinner once, and Micah's mum had served them this soup with bits of stuff floating in it. He thought it was chicken, or maybe some kind of overcooked vegetable, but it wasn't. It was brain, calf brain. Ooh, Samuel shuddered. He might not fancy fish. He might be tired of plain old ordinary bread, but there was no way he was going to trade it for a basket of brains. Micah waved, and Samuel waved back. Then he turned as quickly as he could and hurried off in the opposite direction. "There has to be somebody with a better lunch than mine," he thought. And then he saw another boy from the village, Aaron. Samuel didn't know Aaron all that well, but he'd heard that Aaron's mum was an amazing cook. It seemed like a good choice. "Hey, Aaron!" he shouted, the basket behind his back again. "I want to swap lunches." Aaron, who was a bit older than Samuel and a great deal taller, folded his arms and looked down at him. "Well," he began, "you know that my mother is the finest cook in the village." "Yeah, I heard that," Samuel nodded. "Why, I remember the time we had the mayor over for a meal." "Have you met the mayor?" Aaron asked. "Yeah, sure," replied Samuel. "Well, we haven't had him over to dinner, but—" "I didn't think so," Aaron sighed, as if he was already bored with the conversation. But then he went on. "My mother prepared a lovely bit of lamb, marinated in red wine and her own special mixture of herbs," and on, "with barley bread, her own unique recipe," and on, "and at the end we had some beautiful fresh figs drizzled with honey." Samuel tried to get a word in, but it was hopeless, and he found himself in the strangest position, his mouth drooling, his brain turning to mush, and his feet desperate to carry him as far away as possible. At last he just swung the basket in front of Aaron and shouted, "Do you want to swap or not?" Aaron peered into the basket and turned up his nose. "You are joking, I hope. That food's not fit for human consumption." Samuel shouted again, "It's not drizzled with barley and fresh figs, if that's what you mean." And he let his feet win the argument and take him to the other side of the hill. "Oh, there must be somebody with something to swap," he muttered to nobody in particular. But there wasn't. People were talking. People were moving about. Some of them were complaining. but nobody seemed to be eating. So Samuel resigned himself to his fate, sat down, and reached into his basket. Just then, someone sat down beside him. It was someone he didn't know, a young man, maybe 18 or 19 years old. "My name's Andrew," said the man. Samuel slowly withdrew his hand from the basket. "You don't want to swap by any chance, do you?" he asked. "Swap?" replied Andrew, surprised. No, I don't have anything to swap with you." Samuel rolled his eyes. Another lost cause. "What I did wonder, though, and this is going to sound strange," Andrew went on, "was if you wouldn't mind coming with me and showing your lunch to Jesus." "Jesus?" Samuel shrugged. "What, the guy who's been doing all the talking?" "Teaching, yes." Andrew nodded. "He's a rabbi, and that's what he does." "And now he wants my lunch?" "I told you it sounded strange," said Andrew. "Look, here he is. Jesus, here's a boy with something to eat." Jesus joined them. "Excellent," he grinned, and then he turned to Samuel. "Would you mind," he asked, "if I borrowed your lunch for a bit?" This was getting stranger still, and Samuel didn't mind saying so. "How do you borrow somebody's lunch?" he asked. "Hand me the basket," Jesus smiled, "and I'll show you." Jesus shut his eyes and bowed his head. So did Andrew, and Samuel joined in. It seemed the polite thing to do. Jesus thanked God for the fish. Jesus thanked God for the bread. Samuel was relieved that he didn't have to join in for that bit. He wasn't, to be perfectly honest, feeling very thankful. And then, when all the thanking was over, Jesus reached into the basket and pulled out a piece of bread. He broke it in half. He broke it in quarters. But the more he broke it, the more there seemed to be. Samuel rubbed his eyes. Was this some sort of trick? But no, the more Jesus broke, the more there was. And it was just the same with the fish. Andrew and some of Jesus' other friends started passing the fish and bread around. And soon everybody on the hillside was eating fish and bread. Samuel shook his head. There must have been thousands of them. When Jesus had finished and everyone had been fed, he handed the basket back to Samuel. There were still 2 fish and 5 pieces of bread inside. "That's how you borrow somebody's lunch," Jesus whispered. "Thanks for playing along." Samuel stood up slowly and staggered away, shocked and amazed by what he'd seen. So shocked, in fact, that he failed to watch where he was going and bumped straight into Aaron. "Watch it," Aaron grunted, and then he added, "Oh, it's you. Still carrying around that pathetic excuse for a lunch, are you? Well, I've have you know that I've just had the most incredible meal. Fish and bread like you've never tasted. Oh, I'm dying to tell Mother all about it." And he rushed away. Samuel thought about saying something, but what was the point? Aaron would never have believed it anyway. On the other hand, he thought, if snooty Aaron thinks it's so great. And he tore off a piece of bread, and he took a bite of a piece of fish. And then he smiled at the miracle in his mouth, for it was delicious. That's one of the miracles I think I'd most like to have been there, just to see how it all happened, the feeding of the 5,000. There you are. Be safe. God be with you. See you soon.